I think a lot of people perceive my community to be really bad, but I don't think my community is bad. And on the other hand, you have people that actually know and have experiences with Chicago. And since I live close to downtown, it's like a lot of people don't consider downtown like a bad place. Like they go there for stores, for concerts, and a lot of different stuff like that. But then when you think about people that think about the South Side, they think, oh yeah, it's bullets flying everywhere. Like everybody always shooting, it's always somebody dying. But that's not really the case. So it's different opinions on different people's sides. So yeah.
I would like to start a business that will help provide more jobs for people in the community. Because if you provide more jobs for people in the community, that means there's more opportunities. That means kids are exposed to things that they wouldn't be exposed to when they don't have the money and resources.
I think some people who haven't been here or who haven't lived here or just people who live here thinks everything is violent. They think everybody are gangbangers, and that's not the case. It's just a majority of people who don't really have nothing, so that's where they from. I think people view the community like that because of the news. It's all talk about killings in the news, so people could, draw that conclusion.
Like how the media portray the African American community, especially in the South Side of Chicago, considering the fact that they kind of spin around the stories to make it seem like everything is always bad, especially when they, like for example, things like, oh, a single black woman and had, like, instead of saying someone died, like the son of someone died, they would say, oh, the son of a single black woman died from gang violence, stuff like that. So they spin it around as if the way that we're living is causing those issues, rather than how society has kind of put us in a box where they're not helping us grow ourselves. And so the violence just keeps going on.
I think it's viewed negatively, all the communities that I'm a part of, because they're majority black, and black people don't get themselves a good look. They act in a certain way that stereotypes us as a whole, so I don't think it's viewed well.
Really bad. Like, people view us as like really violent. Like, yeah, like I have family down in Texas, and they like, oh, they call up here and they're like, hey, what's up, y'all good, yada yada yada, and they're like, oh, we heard this, we heard that, and they're like really concerned about us. We tell people we from Chicago, and they're like, oh my god, are you okay? And it's like, shawty, chill. We live in it, so, but outside looking in, all they see is like, all right, these many people got shot, this got robbed, this got, like, that's all they see, so that's all they know to associate with the name Chicago. We know that there's more to that.
Since I live on the South Side, I think people like view the South Side like a bad neighborhood or whatever. Then like up north or like the West Side, but it's a lot of violence everywhere in Chicago, but they really focus on the South Side. Cause like a lot of like important and famous people grew up on the South Side. I think my community is viewed this way by others because a lot of black people live in the South Side than more than white people, and like more black people come to the South Side, so people view it wrong. They think they do bad things.
It's a neutral place. It's not as bad as Inglewood, but it's not as good as some other places up north. So it's kind of like in between the scales.
I think it's seen as kind of like a white neighborhood, only because I don't want to say it's like a gated community or anything, or a gated neighborhood, but it's very, very quiet. And if you come and go within the neighborhood, you'll most likely see a lot of Native Americans instead of African Americans.
Of course, it's bad, like the way what the media put out. Everybody think like Chicago is bad as a whole, but like everybody know like Chicago has many talents and people coming out of Chicago that's doing big things. So I think it's still viewed bad though.
My community is not viewed too good because of the way the media portrays it. They only show the violence. The media only shows the violence, and they don't tell you about the good things that go on in the community. So people that are outside of the community only look at it as bad.
I think the Inglewood community and the Southeast Side community is viewed bad by the rest of Chicago. and that's because of the violence and our youth acting like they have no authority, which they don't. Some of them don't, but a lot of them come from good homes and they're just acting out, acting wild. So they're showing the rest of Chicago and the rest of the world that they have no authority. They just don't have any goals. There's no future with these kids. They don't care what happens to them.
I think we all share the same viewpoint that Chicago is violent, but I also think that it's so much to Chicago just besides the violence. So it just depends really on what you're talking about. I say that because the city got so much to offer, like good food, music, culture, just all type of things. But violence is definitely a big part of it.
Littering is going to take place anywhere in general, but there are some places that are more prevalent because there's less people maintaining them. We all pay taxes, whether we want to or not. We all pay taxes, and honestly, this service should be distributed evenly, and you can definitely see it on poorer areas. You find that they tend to have worse conditions, tend to be living underneath worse conditions.
I think that other people think that it's unsafe because it's Inglewood, a lot of violence.
Very negative. When people think of Chicago, they think, oh, it's a beautiful city, but it's also negative. And they think Chicago is just really black when there is some diversity here. When I was in Texas, everybody thought Chicago was bad. And I was like, it's not even that bad, it's not even that bad. But when I moved here, I actually saw what they were talking about. So, yeah, a lot of outsiders don't know what violence is until they come to Chicago, if that makes sense.
I feel like our community is very historic. But right now, at the moment, I feel like some people view it as being dangerous. But when they really get to know the community and the people that's in it, their opinion really changed. I believe they view our community this way because of the murder rates. You sit outside for a little while, you hear sirens. You just hear some things that isn't normal to maybe their community, and they don't understand as to why it's going on. But I feel like if they really get a true understanding of why it's going on, they know our community isn't as bad as it really seems.
You know, anybody who don't live in Chicago and live in other states, they think Chicago is, Chicago have a nickname as Chirac, and I think it's viewed negatively and more negative than it actually is. I think there's a stigma about Chicago that it can't really shake. Although Chicago is not the worst city in the United States to live in per capita, even though they may have a large large quantity of violent crimes and murders. Per capita, we're not number one. So I don't think people really understand that concept that Chicago is a very large city. And that's one of the reasons that a very large city with a large population of poor and non-privileged people, and that's one of the things that contribute to the crime.
They may see the good and the bad of it because it's what gets portrayed through the media. It's too heavily on one side. I think it's wrong because that's not all that's going on. But it's pretty right.
My area is either ignorant and ghetto and just we just reckless because we known for violence and basically black on black crime, and the fact that we're black ourselves and we have so many other people against us. The fact that we're going against each other, they'll be like, oh, they must be ignorant enough to actually know that we don't know that we should be working together to fight against everybody else. So I'd say that we'll be viewed as ignorant.
Chicago is a global city that people come here from all walks of life. I'm on the subway sometimes or on the L train and I hear, foreign with their maps and so you see that a lot in the coastal cities. But to see people coming to Chicago in the cold winter, it's just really
a good feeling, but I also know on the flip side of that unfortunately, because of the shootings that have continued to plague the cities year by year, that there's also parts of the city that don't enjoy such a good reputation.